Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to wait just about 30 seconds or so and get started. We appreciate your coming. Thanks so much for joining, everyone. We're going to get started in just a little bit. Hey, everyone, let's get started. Thank you so much again for joining us. It is always our honor to be able to share space with you and to let you know what we're up to. I'm Imani Rupert Gordon, and you are going to be spending the next hour or hour and a half or so with NCLR. And we are going to break down what the first 100 days of this administration has been like for our community. We're going to talk about what NCLR is doing and then what the larger movement is doing to push back. I know it seems like a lot of time that we're going to be here, but at the end of this, it's going to be our hope that you will be in a better position to explain what's happening and why it matters. And you'll be able to have those conversations with people in your community. So we're going to tell you what we're up against, what we can do, and why what we're doing is going to help all of us. That said, our team has outlined what we think is going to be top of mind for many folks. We try to keep this at a high level, but we can go into the weeds. So if you have questions, please put those in the chat. You can put those in as they come up for you, and we'll do our best to either answer them as they come in if we can catch them, or we can respond back through the question and answer function while we're speaking. And we will have an opportunity at the end of this webinar to have a question and answer too. So if we didn't get to anything, we will get to it then. And if we don't have an answer for you, which could be true, we will follow up and get back to you with an answer. I think it's really important for you to know as much as you can, and we want to be as helpful as we can to do that. And so lastly, I just want to remind you that this is a recording. And so this and all of NCLR's other briefings are available on our YouTube channel. And so we want you to go back. We want you to use this as a reference. We've spent a lot of time putting this together. I want you to be able to enjoy it. So that said, in just a few minutes, you're going to hear from some of our amazing staff. But before you do, I just want to talk to you about where we are and kind of set the stage to how NCLR is thinking about this. Because for us, it's no secret that we're being attacked from everywhere right now. We're being attacked as individuals, and we're being attacked in the systems that we rely on to keep us safe. We're being attacked by the organizations that are protecting our civil and human rights are being attacked. And so trying to figure out all of these things, where they sit together, are all things that we're sitting with right now. What stands out to me is that when we look at the news, very often the things that we are worried about on Monday are very different than what we're concerned about on Friday. And this is something that is intentional. This is an attempt to overwhelm us. And in many cases, it's working for a lot of folks in our community. We are bombarded with some of the worst things. And a lot of these things are blatantly unconstitutional. And that is exhausting to just know that something is inherently unfair and it's happening anyway. But because of this, we know that the very best thing that we can do is to fight back right now in this moment. And for us to fight back is to be in the courts. Right now, it is of the utmost importance for us to engage the judicial system and to combat the administrative overreach that we're seeing and these hateful actions. Litigation is a tool that is in place for us to fight back. So much so that LGBTQ and social justice organizations that aren't even legal organizations are starting to take up litigation. Litigating is how we fight, and we're going to see more of it. And that's why our work is so important. And right now, we can't cede any ground. When we know that something is unconstitutional, we can't just say, oh, they'll just do anything, or I can't believe they're doing this. No, we have laws in place. We have this judicial system. to prevent this from happening. And so we have to hold them accountable, and we have to do it now. And if we don't, they'll just continue doing what they're doing until it's almost impossible for us to hold them accountable. And so in a lot of ways, we're dealing with some bullies, and we need to treat them that way. And so right now, knowing that this is the work that we have to do, knowing that we can't fight everything, we have to be as strategic as possible. And that is both within our organization and with our movement partners. We have to find the ways to fight so that we can have the greatest impact to protect our folks. You've heard us say it before, but we are taking the approach to stop, delay, and to reduce harm. And this is giving us the opportunity to both protect our community, but it's also creating time for people to understand what's happening, how it's affecting everyone in our communities, how it's bad for all of us, so that we can find ways for other people to plug in and fight back. The issues that we're looking at, they're not just LGBTQ issues. When policies eliminate bedrock protections for gender discrimination, that's something that affects all of us. When essential healthcare and healthcare research is gutted, that's something that affects all of us. When there's dismantlement of our critical protections, our safety net programs, and the systems that we rely on to keep us safe, those are all things that affect all of us. So today we're going to talk about the attacks on immigrants, poor and working class people, people of color, disabled folks, LGBTQ folks, with trans folks in particular. And we're going to talk about how our work is directly in response to protecting these communities. We're going to talk about the damning economic policies we've seen, from tariffs to threats to Medicaid and Medicare, Social Security, slashes in our safety net programs like SNAP, food pantries, school lunches, all of this. We're going to talk about what we can do and what we can do outside of litigation as well to support our folks, knowing that it's going to be important for us to work right now in the here and now and set a stage for us to be able to move in the future. We're going to talk about how recent changes affecting legal aid and federal funding and what this means for our organization. So we have a lot in front of us today, and we're going to get started. We are joined today by Shannon Minter, NCLR's VP of Legal, Pam Mercado Garcia, who's a program associate for HOGAR, NCLR's Immigration and Asylum Program, Tyrone Hanley, Director of Racial and Economic Justice Initiatives, Ming Wong, Director of Community Justice and Access, and Amy Whalen, Senior Staff Attorney. Remember, you can ask questions throughout, and again, we are going to leave time at the end for Q&A, so go ahead and put those in. That said, we are going to get started. Shannon, we're going to start with you.
Hey, thank you so much. And it's so good to be here with you all and with my colleagues. I'm just thinking, it's so easy to feel isolated, and connection is power and information is power. So it's just really good to have a chance to share just some really basic information with you all about what we are doing. This is really easy to get disoriented with just the blizzard of executive orders that have been issued by this administration. And that's part of the intent of course, is just to render us kind of helpless to respond, because it's just one after another. But let's talk about that. So for one thing, what is an executive order? I think a lot of people maybe don't know that. Like, an executive order it's a directive issued by the President of the United States. It manages some aspect of federal operations or activity. And executive orders do have the full force of law as long as the president is issuing an order that is in an area that where the Constitution gives the president direct authority, like for example, over the military, or if Congress has delegated authority to the president. And these are really powerful tools. I mean, they've been used for good and for ill by, presidents for a long time. And they allow a president to make major policy decisions without congressional involvement or approval. However, they are subject to judicial review. So an executive order can be overturned if a federal court finds that it's unconstitutional, or if the president is acting in some area that is not his area of authority, that's supposed to be given to Congress. I'll just give you one quick example of that. I mean, this president is testing that every chance he gets. He's just issuing executive orders about everything, whether or not it's something that the president is supposed to have authority over. So one of the things he did that was so shocking and terrible is issue an executive order saying, I'm going to cut all federal funding to any hospital or any other kind of program that provides health care to transgender minors. And they started pulling funding from people, and hospitals all over the country started no longer providing that care. I mean, this was like really scary for these families and kids who are dependent on these facilities for their health care. So lawsuits were filed, and the courts now, two different federal courts have blocked the enforcement of that executive order trying to strip funding from these facilities and hospitals, and said, no, that is outside of your area. It's Congress that gets to say what federal funds are used for. That's the spending power. That's congressional. The president can't come in after Congress has allocated federal funding to these hospitals and say you're going to take it away for some reason that a Congress condition or a restriction that Congress didn't impose. So that's just an example of how there can be very serious pushback against some of these overreaching federal orders. President Trump has signed more executive orders in a shorter period of time than any other president in history. He signed 143 executive orders during his first 100 days. That is a record. The closest one, next closest president was Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who issued 99 orders in his first 100 days. And that was, during a crisis and during the Great Depression in 1993. So 33, sorry, 1933. So, these executive orders have just been all over the place, addressing all kinds of issues, but mostly they've been focused on immigration, on border issues, on energy, trade, federal workforce policies, and several of them, as we all are very painfully aware, very directly impact LGBTQ people in our communities. And especially, there's been a very big focus on transgender people and transgender rights. I think probably the most significant, I would say, is one that President Trump issued the very first day he was in office. It's got this horrible name, so-called Defending Women from Gender Ideology Extremism and Restoring Biological Truth to the Federal Government. Just so much anti-transgender propaganda built into even the title of that executive order. But this is the one that purports to establish, as a matter of like official federal policy and law, that there are only two sexes, and that your sex is defined at birth and that you can never change your sex. And the whole point of that order was to try to block any sort of recognition or protection of transgender people in any area of federal law, whether it be education, housing, healthcare, you name it. And then after that, there were several more executive orders doing things like saying that transgender people can no longer correct gender markers on passports or Social Security. They're banning transgender people from military service, prohibiting transgender girls or women from participating in women's sports. Again, the ones about essentially trying to ban healthcare for transgender young people, for federal employees, pulling any federal funding for any health-related research that deals with not just transgender people, but LGBT people across the board, or women, or people of color, or any identified group. So there have been a lot of executive orders. There's also been a whole lot of lawsuits challenging these executive orders. I think as of a couple days ago, we were up to 222 cases challenging Trump's executive orders. And those they cover all the issues: immigration policies, voting rights, LGBT issues. I'm talking about some of the cases we filed in that area. attempts to end diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, federal funding freezes, environmental policies. There have been a lot of lawsuits, and the vast majority of them have been successful. So it is important. I'm not sure everyone recognizes this. It's important to recognize not just that we're fighting back, but we, and I'm speaking we broadly, we the people, are winning many important victories in these court cases. And I am really proud I'm proud of NCLR. I'm proud to be able to share with you all that NCLR, we filed not just the first challenge to one of the executive orders addressing LGBTQ issues or targeting LGBT people. We filed the first three. We wasted no time in jumping in and getting some lawsuits filed as soon as this started happening. So right away, we filed a challenge to the transgender military ban, and then also to federal policies that purport to require transgender women to be housed in male prisons and that cut off health care for incarcerated transgender people. The reason we acted so quickly in those two areas in particular, because we recognized that those were two areas where speed was of the essence, where it was absolutely essential that someone step up and immediately file lawsuits. And we did that in the military context because we knew it was just so critical to get a court order blocking enforcement of that ban before Trump could execute a mass purge of transgender service members, which is what the order was directing the military to do, to just overnight get rid of thousands of transgender service members in one fell swoop. Once that happens, if we allow that to happen, it's very difficult to undo that. So we wanted to jump in and make sure a court was saying, basically, hell no, you cannot do that. And in the prison setting, we knew this is so painful, so terrible, but we knew that transgender women who are currently being housed in women's facilities would be raped and assaulted if they were moved. And again, the order was, there were orders coming down to immediately transfer women to male facilities, and everyone knew what was going to happen. Everyone knew what that would mean. So, I'm going to let my colleague Amy talk more about some of the more details about those cases in a minute. But I just want to say that, to my knowledge, we were able to prevent any transgender woman housed in women's prisons from being transferred. So we did stop that. With respect to the military, we knew that preventing a transgender ban is critical for many reasons. One is it would be a huge betrayal of service members who, they're serving our country. They relied on the promise that it would be okay to identify themselves as transgender, to go through gender transition, to serve, and that, that our country made a commitment to those people, and to allow them to just be, summarily purged from the military was something that would be so terrible and wrong and set such a horrible precedent. Also, the military is the nation's largest employer. It would set a terrible precedent that it's okay to discriminate against transgender people in public employment if we just let that ban go into effect. Believe me, that would very quickly, if the federal government said, oh, it's okay to keep transgender people out of military service because they're mentally unstable. We don't want to put them under too much pressure. They have to go through all this healthcare, all these bogus reasons that have absolutely no basis in reality. Well, those very same justifications would, you can bet, be used to keep transgender people out of civilian jobs. You can't get a security clearance, so you can't work in a high-level federal public employee job. You can't be a teacher, and then beyond just to the private employment sphere. If you look at it historically, being excluded from military service has been a very powerful way to stigmatize marginalized people, and the opposite is true as well, which is part of why you've seen women, people of color, More recently, people with HIV and people from minority religions like Sikhs have fought very hard to be included in the military and have gone to court many times to challenge restrictions on their ability to serve equally alongside others. So it is no coincidence that this administration is seeking not only to ban transgender people from military service, they're also trying to restrict the role of women in firing and demoting leaders of color and women leaders at a very rapid clip. This is all of a piece to transform the military so that it no longer reflects the diversity of our country and just becomes a tool to serve a president that has very little respect for equality, civil rights, diversity, inclusion, or so forth. So we did file a challenge and we obtained a preliminary ruling that blocked enforcement of the ban. We actually ended up filing a second case. We filed our first case in Washington, D.C. We filed a second case in New Jersey, and there was another case filed by some colleague organizations in Washington. All three courts agreed the ban is unconstitutional. The government has now asked the Supreme Court to step in and issue an emergency stay to allow the ban to go into effect. So we filed our brief on behalf of all the service members we represent in the United States Supreme Court earlier today. You can read that brief on our website. We expect the court to issue its ruling very soon, and sure hope that they do not undo the victories that we've achieved so far. I'm optimistic, but stay tuned on that. We're also gearing up to help defend state laws that protect LGBT young people from conversion therapy. This is another big issue that is looming now in a way, just with an intensity that has not been present for a while. So 30 years ago now, more than 30 years ago, NCLR started the first ever legal advocacy program to combat this abuse, to represent young people who are threatened with conversion therapy or subjected to conversion therapy. We've represented a lot of individual young people over the years, and we helped pass more than 25 state laws prohibiting mental health professionals from subjecting young people to conversion therapy. I will tell you that we help defend those laws. Those laws have been challenged by conversion therapists and anti-LGBT groups. We've had an unbroken track record of success until last year. The 11th Circuit issued a terrible ruling striking down one of those laws in Florida. That then has created a conflict between different federal courts of appeal, which usually leads to the Supreme Court addressing an issue. And I am sorry to tell you, the Supreme Court has now agreed to hear a challenge to Colorado's law protecting youth from conversion therapy. That's teed up. The briefing will take place later this summer, and we're working really hard. We're working alongside of the Colorado Attorney General to defend that law and to line up amicus support. So keep your eye on that one too. I'm going to end with here, but please know, we are undaunted. I know this is a dark moment in many ways for our community, but I just want you to know we have not wasted a single moment, in despair or allowing ourselves to be overwhelmed. We have sprung into action to fight for you, to fight for all of us, and we're going to continue to do that.
Thank you so much, Shannon. I really appreciate your saying that. It's important for us to know what's out there, but also do rest assured that we're paying attention, we're following up, and we're fighting for y'all. Next, we are gonna have Pam come up. Thanks so much.
Hi, everybody. I today will be discussing an overview of what's happening in immigration right now and the work that we do here in OGAD. We are an LGBTQ organization, and we've been seeing and working in LGBTQ immigration issues after cases like matter of the Bozo Alfonso and Hernandez Montiel versus the INS happened in the 90s. And these are important because they recognize that people could seek asylum in the United States if they were persecuted for their sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. And primarily what Hogar does is that we do direct services, and we work primarily with asylum seekers. And asylum seekers, regardless of the fact that they can apply for asylum, they have to go through a really demanding process where they undergo extensive biometrics, background checks. They often have to share their trauma experiences with immigration officials and the harm that they have suffered, as well as psychological and medical examination documents of the effects that those harms do to them. And regardless of that, with the administration, we have been seeing anti-immigrant rhetoric happen and policies to justify the pushing of the limits of the president's power to block immigration pathways created by Congress, such as asylum and TPS, which is temporary protected status. This is creating fear in our communities, in the immigrant communities, and it uses immigrants as scapegoats. Some examples of these actions or attempts to these actions by the administration have been trying to remove citizenship from those that have been born in the United States. However, this has been blocked by multiple court orders, thankfully. There's the closure of the Mexico-US border, and it puts in danger marginalized populations, including LGBTQ plus folks seeking violence, fleeing from their countries. There's an increase in ICE raids happening all across the country, and the administration is allowing such raids to take places in churches, courts, and schools, which is something that didn't happen before. They're allowing immigration judges to dismiss asylum cases without hearing. Without a hearing. This has happened to one of our clients. These forced us to file affirmative asylum at the asylum office, which causes confusion, fear, and delay for our client and for many that are facing similar experiences. We have had and are seeing expedited removals from asylum seekers. There's been fast deportation without proper hearings or due process. And then there's the halting for nonprofit organizations that are working with children immigrants, which leaves them without representation. And this is really sad because a lot of them are unaccompanied minors. So in our work personally, we're seeing that we continue to receive calls and inquiries from individuals that follow procedures at the borders. They were given legal permission to enter the United States, and while they waited for their immigration status, now they're getting letters saying that they must leave the United States within 7 days or they'll be detained and deported. We hear colleagues that have been reporting that immigration judges are closing cases if applications for asylum do not include detailed declaration. And this is hard for people because not everybody has an attorney to represent them, and they have to represent themselves in court. USCIS and DHS also announced that they are gonna put on hold all green card applications that were submitted by asylees and refugees. This is supposed to be temporary, but there has not been given a timeline for this. And there also has been an order to delay all applications. We heard from colleagues' reports that the USCIS and DHS are not sending receipt notices for applications that have been submitted. And we've also seen that there are ignoring inquiries from legal representatives or delaying getting back from them with the inquiries. There's concerns that we have, especially for our transgender clients, because the current administration is changing the immigration forms to require applicants to only put their sex assigned at birth in the forms. And this is forcing our clients to make really what it is an impossible decision for them when submitting applications relating to their immigration status. And just overall, we continue to see and deal with issues of long delays in processing of all types of applications, whether it is a work permit application or a renewal or a green card application or application for citizenship. And this the overarching just view of this is that it leaves our clients with stress, fear, uncertainty, and not just our clients, just in general, the community as a whole is scared right now because we are in a space of the unknown, right? So what we're doing right now is that we're gonna continue to do the best that we can to represent our clients and provide resources to people in the community through our helpline. We're also have been partnering with other organizations to do know your rights trainings in the community and for the community members. And we continue to collaborate with immigrant rights organizations and our pro bono council on what this is going to look like. What are going to be our next steps on these issues, and how are we going to challenge the worst of these policies? And that would be all.
Pam, thank you so much. I'm really glad that we were able to talk in so much detail about our HOGAR program. There's a lot changing very, very quickly, and our team has been really amazing with finding new ways to protect our folks and staying informed and making sure that we can give folks the best possible advice. So thank you so much, Pam. Next, we're going to bring up Tyrone Hanley, a Director of Racial and Economic Justice Initiatives. Thanks so much, Tyrone.
Hello, everyone. We're going to switch gears a little bit and focus on Congress. So Congress is actually considering making the biggest cuts to the social safety net in our lifetimes. That includes Medicaid, which is basically healthcare for low-income people, and SNAP, formerly known as food stamps, and other vital programs to offset costs of giving tax cuts to rich and corporations. These programs are lifelines for LGBTQ people who are disproportionately experience poverty. If these cuts are made, more people will go hungry and not have access to life-saving healthcare just because they can't afford to pay it. Additionally, these cuts are made, it's going to put the cost more on states and local communities, which already are struggling to have balanced budgets, which means potentially make some hard choices between offsetting these cuts by putting into their state budgets, which could mean actually cuts to other programs are not even related directly to these cuts. So they could have a rippling effect in our communities beyond the actual cuts themselves. Because the rule that Congress is using to pass these cuts, they only require a simple majority in both chambers of Congress. Typically, you need at least 60 votes in the Senate to pass legislation. Because of the rule they're using to pass these cuts, effectively that means not a single Democratic vote is needed in either chamber of Congress for the cuts actually to go forward. So that's a really important piece of this to understand. So hearings have already begun in the process in determining where the cuts are actually be made. Because we know the level of cuts that they're looking at to make, we know that they're going to have to go after Medicaid and SNAP, because that's only really the areas where you can make those, that amount of cuts to reach their goals. But we will in time get to learn through these hearings and the reports that the committees put out what specific cuts are going to make. So we know that right now their plan is effectively to have this done by Memorial Day, but there's been a huge struggle to getting even to this point in the process, because there was already disagreement within the Republican majority about where to make cuts, because there are members who one already know that they're not popular. People really do support Medicaid and food access, and that's like a huge majority of people in this country, regardless of their political affiliation. And then there are also members who want to make even bigger cuts. So there's a lot of disagreement there. So while right now the timeline is Memorial Day, there are expectations that this is going to go at least into the summer, if not into the fall. So this is like where you come in. We hope that you will join the National LGBTQ Anti-Poverty Action Network, which is a network of LGBTQ and anti-poverty organizations working at the intersection of LGBTQ identity and poverty and pushing back against these cuts. We believe that we can be successful. I don't know if you remember, But back during Trump 1.0, there was an attempt to repeal the Affordable Care Act that failed. There's that infamous moment where John McCain put his thumbs down, right? So there is a lot of possibility here for actually to stop these cuts because again, they're very deeply unpopular. So we really hope that you really take this time. I think a lot of us are really looking like how to respond. How can we actually have an impact in this moment? This is actually an area where you can have an impact, especially if you are in a state that's represented by a Republican or you are in a district that's represented by a Republican, because again, this can go pass through Congress without a single Democratic vote. And because Republicans are a majority, they're the ones basically who are driving this conversation. So we hope that you continue to look at NCLR social media to figure out other ways that you can tap into this. But we do believe we can win this fight. And I'll turn it back to you, Amani. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tyrone, and thanks so much for explaining some of this as well. I think a lot of times we talk about tax cuts without getting to what is being cut. And so thanks for making that so clear with folks and for giving folks a call to action and ways that you can get involved. Right now, more than ever, I think folks are trying to find ways to plug in and aren't always sure. So thank you so much for giving folks an opportunity there. Ming, we're going to bring you up next.
Great. Thanks so much, Imani, and thanks to all of my colleagues who are speaking here today, as well as to all of you for joining. I think the fact that we're having this call is a great source of hope for me, that so many folks are interested in hearing about our work and learning about what's been done and what's still possible in protecting our communities and in some ways the foundational systems that have protected us in the past. I'm going to spend my time talking about some of the effects of what's been going on with the current administration, what we're seeing from the community, including community service providers, legal aid providers, healthcare professionals, and then I'll spend a little bit of time at the end of my time sharing about what we're seeing in the realm of family law. In particular, family law has been a very core part of NCLR's work and continues to be an important part of the work that we do. But I'm going to start us off talking about what we're seeing on our helpline. So NCLR has fielded calls from the community since we began, from individuals just calling us because they trust us. They know that we are a legal organization that serves our community, and they reach out to us looking for legal help, and we try to provide as much resources and information as we can to them, including looking for LGBTQ-friendly attorneys in their area if we're not able to directly assist them. And so what we're seeing in recent, in the months since this administration took office is an increase in calls and people who are really afraid. People calling us about their identity documents. We've seen a sharp uptick in that, particularly around passports. That was one of the first executive orders that began being implemented by the State Department to delay or essentially stop issuing passports, including renewing passports with gender markers that match a person's identity, instead forcing people to accept passports with gender markers corresponding only to their sex assigned at birth, even if every other piece of identity documentation they had, including their previous passport, listed them as the gender that they actually identified as. So we're getting a lot of calls about that. People are very worried about what it means for travel to have a passport that doesn't match your presentation and your identity and your other documents. And we also saw an increase in calls from people who are from parents, basically, who are worried about protecting their children. So a lot of these are parents who may not be biologically related to their children, worried about how they can ensure that their relationship with their child is recognized. And then also parents of trans or non-binary children who are very scared about what the various executive orders, as well as a certain response to those executive orders from not just federal agencies, but a kind of emboldened anti-trans movement and lawmakers in the states, and then institutions in civil society kind of capitulating or as Shannon mentioned, you know, there were a number of hospitals that felt pressured into stopping healthcare for transgender kids, and parents, of course, understandably, are very frightened about that happening, or have already faced it happening and are worried about what they can do to still secure the healthcare that their kids need. Every one of these calls is pretty heartbreaking. A lot of times there's not an easy legal solution for families that call us, and families have to make some hard decisions, up to and including moving to a friendlier jurisdiction where they can get the healthcare they need. And I mean, it's heartbreaking to hear about people having to do that. So that's my kind of report from the helpline. I'll say a bit about civil legal aid, which is another area that NCLR has been very involved with over the past few years. So if people don't know, civil legal aid is free legal services, full representation often for low-income people. Much of the funding for civil legal aid in this country comes from the Legal Services Corporation, which was funded and created by Congress. It is not itself a federal agency. It's actually a private nonprofit, so it is not under the direct control of the president. And I'll say over the past, I would say about decade and a half, a lot of legal aid organizations across the country recognized that they weren't doing all they could to reach all of the parts of the communities that they were serving. In particular, they noticed they were not hearing from LGBTQ constituents in their communities, or maybe they were hearing from them but didn't have the expertise needed to meet the particular legal needs of their LGBTQ constituents. And so they started taking steps to increase their ability to provide those services and to do outreach to LGBTQ people in their communities. So NCLR came in, we started a project in collaboration with California Rural Legal Aid to support legal aid organizations in doing that work, in expanding their capacity to serve LGBTQ folks in their communities. These are low-income LGBTQ people. What we're seeing now, what we've seen in the past 100 days, is a real insidious and I think cold-hearted attempt by the administration and their quasi-governmental advisors to politicize legal aid. So if people don't know, legal aid and the Legal Services Corporation has broad bipartisan support. It is an overwhelmingly popular thing that Congress funds. Its funding has been increased pretty consistently over the past few decades. And by broad bipartisan majorities in Congress. So it is decidedly a bipartisan, nonpartisan institution in our society. There are great arguments that don't necessarily fall into left or right wing ideological narratives for why funding civil legal aid matters. There's a pretty good study that shows that every dollar spent on civil legal aid saves like 10 times that amount of money that you would have to spend on other kind of supportive social services because people's legal rights weren't defended. which makes a lot of sense because a lot of times a legal aid attorney makes a difference between, safety at your job or, working in unsafe conditions and getting an injury, or being able to stay in your home or losing that home and then becoming subject to the types of economic insecurity that comes from not having a stable home. So, legal aid has not been politicized to the degree that it is right now. There are attempts that, there's talk of potentially trying to defund legal aid. And then there's the concern now that certain legal aid organizations will get targeted either individually or as a group because of that work that many organizations have undertaken over the past decade and a half to increase their ability to serve all parts of the community, including their LGBTQ constituents. So we are in touch with a number of legal aid organizations. We've, over the past few years, formed a network of legal aid organizations that we support. And we're hearing from them that a lot of them are very worried about what this work will look like going forward. Will they have to go undercover with this work? Are they going to face threats to their funding because of this work? And this work is just sort of core legal work. For a lot of lawyers, it's at the very heart of what it means to be a lawyer is serving your client. And that's what these attorneys want to do in legal aid, is do the best by all of their clients, including their LGBTQ clients. And now that this is being politicized, a lot of people are worried that they won't be able to essentially do their jobs. We're consulting with a lot of folks and trying to help them think through and manage their risk around this, but it is a real fear. And there's not always good answers, and certainly no one size fits all answer for every legal aid organization, but we are trying to work through and find solutions with folks so that low-income LGBTQ people can continue to receive life-saving legal services. I'll also say that we're also hearing from other types of service providers, particularly in rural communities, and particularly health service providers to transgender people in rural communities who are worried about what these new executive orders will mean for their funding. Many of them don't only serve transgender patients, but they do serve transgender patients and want to continue serving transgender patients. And again, much like the legal aid arena, these are medical professionals who just want to do the best for their patients and are facing a political climate in which some of their work has been deeply politicized. And they're being told that they're advancing a gender ideology when what they are trying to do is protect the health of their patients. So it's very worrying. We are trying to provide as much support as we can to these organizations, and again, in terms of managing their risk and connecting them to legal advice about, sometimes they want to restructure so that they're a little more protected, their funding's a little more protected. And I know I said I'd talk about family law, and I do want to quickly say a word about, similar to, legal aid. And I mean, it's particularly galling that federal administration is intruding into family law, which has always traditionally been the providence of the states. So family law is essentially state law. There's little to no such thing as federal family law. And two, that this country in general and all the states have generally recognized that parents have a very well-protected constitutional right to care for their children and to determine what is in the interests of their children. And what we are seeing is an administration, again, wielding this political bogeyman, if you will, of a gender ideology to intrude into parents' decisions about how to care for their own children. One particularly striking example, this wasn't directly from the federal administration, but rather a state level court, but kind of shows how this happened. But in Mississippi, the Supreme Court just upheld a lower court denying a name change order, just a name change, not even a gender change court order, to a young person where the young person wanted the name change and both parents wanted the name change for their child, and the court injected its own opinion saying that this would not be in the child's best interests. And that is, you know, in normal political and legal times, shocking that a court would substitute its own judgment for that of two parents and the child. So just wanted to note that we are in dangerous times, that this administration and its sort of followers are kind of injecting interference and politicizing parts of civic life that we have not, to a degree, we have not seen before.
Thank you so much, Ming. It's important for us to recognize that what's happening is different, and sometimes the places that we go to for support don't always know the best ways to protect our community. So Ming, I appreciate you talking about the ways that NCLR is doing that, but also this is something, again, that folks, there are organizations that you're working with, talk about the things that are important to you. Let them know that these are things that have to happen. You know, we've seen in a lot of different organizations, as Ming mentioned, something's being taken off of a website. And it doesn't mean that things aren't happening. It's just that sometimes they feel like they can't share them. I know in a lot of times we can be really critical of the organizations that we're working with, but it's also just really important for us to recognize that people are trying to do the best they can. And so be communicative with the organizations that mean something to you. So next we are going to talk to Amy Whalen, Senior Staff Attorney.
Great. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Imani. I'm Amy Whalen, Senior Staff Attorney at NCLR for the past 14 years. Yikes. I'm going to talk about NCLR's work in 1 minute, but I also just wanted to thank everyone on this call for being here. And that includes, of course, my amazing coworkers at NCLR, but also everybody who is doing things every day to stay engaged right now and working in so many ways to make sure that we are fighting this administration at every turn. It's so heartening to know that we are in this together, so thank you. For people who have followed our work for a long time, you know that NCLR's North Star has always been to protect LGBTQ people in every aspect of society. So that means everywhere they are. Schools, universities, workplaces, healthcare offices, public accommodations, prisons and jails, immigration and asylum proceedings, public services, ID documents, sports, and more. And I think it's safe to say that our work has never been more critical than it is right now. It's not a coincidence that Trump's executive orders target these same areas. And it's clear that his orders are intended to create chaos and confusion. Shannon talked about this executive order also, but I'm going to talk about it in a little more detail related to one of our sets of cases. So on January 20th, which is the first day Trump took office, he issued this executive order called Defending Women from Gender Ideology Extremism and Restoring Biological Truth to the federal government. And some parts of that order, it's a long order, there's a lot to it, but some of the parts specifically attacked transgender women housed in federal prisons. Shannon talked about this. And one part required immediately that any transgender woman housed in a women's facility be immediately transferred to a men's facility. And another part mandated that the federal prisons immediately stop all medical treatment for gender dysphoria. Again, targeting prisons in this way, if we didn't stop it, would then lead, of course, to the Trump administration attempts to interfere with healthcare in other realms too. So combined, these provisions were intended to seriously endanger these women's lives. We are talking about an incredibly vulnerable population. We knew, as everyone did, including the Trump administration, that if these women were moved to men's prisons, they would be immediately targeted for violence and assault. So 6 days after that executive order was issued, we sued the Trump administration. And on that same day, we obtained our first emergency federal court order stopping the federal prison system from transferring those women and ordering the prisons to continue their medical care. Within 3 weeks after that executive order was issued, we had 3 separate cases on behalf of 20 of these women. And during that time, we prepared legal briefs and arguments, but we also gathered critical factual information from our clients about what was happening to them. And we also quickly worked with experts to make sure that the judges had information in front of them so that they could understand how incredibly dangerous these prison directives were to the health and well-being of our clients. So because of these cases, these women are protected from these serious harms while we continue to litigate for permanent orders. The government is now appealing those orders, but they will remain in place during those appeals. So these cases are in line with NCLR's strategy of protecting the most marginalized people in our community. By targeting prisoners, the administration was seeking to target some of the most vulnerable people in our community. A lot of people have no idea what happens to prisoners. They're separated from society. It's hard to reach them. It's very hard to shine a light on what is happening to them. So by targeting them, the administration knew that maybe people wouldn't pay attention. We could not let that happen or allow the administration to so blatantly put people at such significant risk of harm. And I just want to say a little bit of context is also important here. It's really only in the last 2 decades that prisons and jails have been required by federal law to protect vulnerable prisoners from assault. Congress passed the Federal Prison Rape Elimination Act in 2003 with overwhelming bipartisan support. You know, like legal aid that Ming just was talking about, this is not a controversial issue. It was supported by Republicans and Democrats alike, and the law was signed into law by George W. Bush. The fact that our clients were in women's prisons at all means that even prison officials recognized how dire and dangerous their circumstances are. So the basic and very uncontroversial premise of the Prison Rape Elimination Act is that people should not be subject to sexual assault as part of their prison sentences. And this EO tried to abolish that safety net for transgender women housed in federal prisons, which would endanger their lives and their safety in some of the most dangerous places in society. So we could not stand by and let that happen. Each time this administration tries to normalize this kind of outrageous violence and harm, it's essential that not only us, we can't do it every time, but that somebody respond and that we take action against that. We cannot allow that to happen. NCLR also has ongoing litigation challenges to state bans on transgender children playing sports. We have a case in Utah. We have another case in Arizona. In both of those cases, we stopped the bans from going into effect, and we're moving in those cases to get final orders. But this is also an issue where the Trump administration has focused its attention because it thinks this is an easy target and because there is widespread misunderstanding about these issues, even in our own community. In fact, NCLR has worked for decades on common sense policies that address fairness and safety in sports within a feminist context of promoting women's sports. So we were at the forefront of developing policies about transgender athletes, including convening think tanks with the NCAA and other organizations. And these policies were in place and worked for decades, and there was never any problem. Now the right wing is weaponizing this issue to try to turn back the clock on gender equality. Because there are so few transgender athletes, again, their strategy is to attack a very vulnerable group of mostly children. And it's very clear that the main goal of these bans is to reinforce harmful gender stereotypes about what women should look like and how strong they can be. So for instance, when Utah first passed its ban on transgender kids playing sports, the only complaints that the High School Athletic Association received were false accusations against young female athletes that people thought might be transgender because they weren't sufficiently feminine enough in the eyes of those people. But what we know and what we have experienced is that our clients are kids who love sports and they want to play with their friends. As someone who played sports through college, I know how incredibly important they are to young people's lives, not just because they provide exercise, of course, which is important, but also because they provide social and emotional benefits that last into adulthood even. Finally, Ming talked a little bit about the passport issues we have been seeing through our helpline. We don't have a direct case about that issue, but the ACLU does. And they have already stopped that executive order from going into effect that bans transgender people from correcting the sex designation on their passports. Right now, that order only covers their specific plaintiffs, but they are working to turn the case into one that will provide relief to everyone. So here too, the Trump administration's goal isn't just to harm transgender people, it's also to enforce a reactionary definition of sex that reduces women to their reproductive capacity. So for decades, NCLR and other groups have had enormous success getting courts to understand that sex is not just about biology. Because of those cases, there have been decisions issued over the years by federal courts and the US Supreme Court that recognize that if there is a law that protects someone from sex discrimination, that includes things like being sexually harassed at work, or a woman being fired for appearing too masculine, or someone being denied housing or medical care because they're gay or transgender. Courts recognize that all of those situations involve discrimination based on sex. And the Trump administration's goal is to roll back that progress and reduce sex to meaning purely someone's reproductive organs. So I just wanted to provide a larger context for people so that they understand that these issues are not always just about transgender people. Like they are often and always about women too, and about other vulnerable people in our society.
Amy, thank you so much. And thanks for that really important analysis. That gender discrimination is very much the work that NCLR does. It's what we have done for literal decades. It's what we were created to do. So excited that we get to continue this work, and thanks for talking about this. You know, these particular cases aren't ones that folks are jumping to do. And so I'm proud that NCLR is able to. It's important, and it's keeping people safe. So that is our panel for you. I want to go to the Q&A to make sure that we answer some questions. And there's one here right now that I'm going to read in just a moment. And I think, Shannon, you can hop on and answer this. But if there are any other questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat so that we can answer them in real time for you. So the question in front of us is, I've been reading about attempts to overturn Obergefell, and that is the marriage equality decision, with some senators calling on the Supreme Court to overturn that decision. Do you think this is a real threat at this time, even if these attempts are merely symbolic right now? Knowing this political situation and the Trump administration, I'm worried. I know other friends are too. What's NCLR doing to protect and defend marriage equality? Shannon, thanks for hopping in.
Yeah, I'm worried too. I definitely think there's some serious people who would love to reverse marriage equality, and we need to be very vigilant about that. One of the best things we've ever done, I'll say, is was it 2 years ago now. We played a really significant role in helping to support and pass the Respect for Marriage Act, which was honestly, you all, a miracle, just an absolute miracle that law passed. But it did. It's a federal law. Congress passed it. The president signed it. um, President Biden. Uh, and it does provide an enormous amount of security for marriage equality. It insulates it from something bad happening on the Supreme Court. It insulates it from red states trying to do bad things. Basically, that law says that as long as a couple, either a same-sex couple or an interracial couple, it actually addresses interracial marriage as well, are lawfully married in any state, that marriage has to be fully respected and protected by every other state and by the federal government. So as long as there are some states that will support marriage equality, which I think we can count on. I mean, there's plenty of states where there's no threat to marriage equality whatsoever and very, very strong support for marriage equality. So as long as there's some states where same-sex couples can marry, that marriage has to be respected everywhere. So you could, even if you live in a state that doesn't respect the marriage, let same-sex couples marry, you could go to that state and your state would have to respect your marriage. I mean, and hopefully it won't come to that. I mean, hopefully there will not ever be a state that tries to undo that. And they can't, as long as Obergefell is in place, that is still law of the land. So a lot of things would have to happen. The Supreme Court would have to somehow reverse or diminish Obergefell, and then some state would have to take action to limit or restrict that right. But even in the worst case scenario where that happened, Respect for Marriage Act provides a lot of protection. I will just say have some degree of concern that some states may go at this indirectly by trying to limit, for example, parental rights of married same-sex couples. Right now, every state recognizes that if a married couple has a child together, both spouses are legal parents, and that applies equally to different sex and same-sex spouses. I want to make sure that continues to be the case. We're litigating a case in Oklahoma right now that's challenging that in Oklahoma, and keeping an eye on that issue. But we're trying to be as vigilant as we can. Monty, you're on mute.
Thank you so much, Shannon. I appreciate that. Sorry about that. So one of the things they're asking about is the the National Anti-Poverty Network. Tyrone, would you mind dropping that in the chat, the name and the website so they can find out more information? It'd be really great.
Yep, will do.
Thank you. And Shannon, I'm looking at this next question. I'm wondering if you can talk a bit about some of the work that we do, in particular about working with religious institutions, but they're asking specifically what has happened to the separation of church and state. I think I understand what they're getting at, but I also wanted, there's some nuanced things there, and I'd love for you to chat about that.
Well, yeah, the Supreme Court has recently really dramatically changed what we used to call the separation of church and state, and has just, it's almost like 180 degrees. It used to be that the Supreme Court was very vigilant about saying that the government could not fund religious schools or organizations or activities. And now it's almost completely flipped the other way, where now the controlling cases are saying that the government has to fund religious activities and entities is the framework now has switched to, if there's some government program where the government is like issuing grants or funding schools, like public schools, but doing it through like a charter school program where the government essentially funds, lets people start their own schools, but they're government funded. That if the government is doing that for secular entities, it has to equally do it for religious entities. So we're just in a whole new world. I mean, I don't think we yet really know what this is exactly going to look like or how it's going to play out. But there's a case in front of the Supreme Court right now about whether I'm trying to remember what state it is. I think it's Oklahoma, whether the state's program for charter schools, whether a purely religious school is entitled under that program to get the same state support, public money, public funding that non-religious schools, charter schools get. And just based on the way the oral argument went, looks like maybe the court's going to say, yeah, that the state has to equally fund a religious school. That is such a dramatic break from the past. I mean, I don't know how this is all going to play out for us, but I think what Amani's alluding to is that we are trying very hard to build bridges to religious communities and organizations to try to break down some of the suspicion and mistrust that has developed over time, where people in the LGBT community are so fearful of persecution and discrimination at the hands of religious organizations. And religious organizations can become very isolated and become very fearful that they're going to be targeted for their beliefs. That's a real thing. Some people in that world genuinely feel that way. But what I've found from doing that work is when we talk to each other, it's unbelievable how quickly some of that mutual suspicion and mistrust can dissipate. And it's just so much better for us to have direct lines of communication with people in the sort of religious world, the moderate conservative religious world. Those are important voices and an important constituency in our society. And we probably have not done ourselves any favor by not attempting to build those bridges. We're better off when we do. We really are. But all of this is a major work in progress, and we're in the middle of a very big fundamental change in the way constitutional law deals with those issues. So we better engage.
Thanks so much, Shannon. A big part of our work is finding ways to make those bridges so that we're able to have folks that are fighting for us when we're not in those rooms. That's a big part of the work that we do. Really that hearts and minds work. And it works alongside of our litigation, works alongside of our public policy work. It takes all of this. And that's, I think, one of the questions I see here are, what are some effective steps that members of the public can do to support the work that you're doing in addition to making contributions? Thank you so much. Always appreciate a plug for making contributions. Obviously, that helps us. But there are a variety of things that folks can do. And I think in this moment, and I'm not someone that says this all the time, but in this moment, I think it is really important that people understand that it does say something when there are protests right now. It does say something when folks are realizing that maybe this isn't working for more people. I said earlier that we look at the news and, the things on Monday are different than the things on Friday, but all of the work that we do to push back, sometimes those things are lost in translation, but it is helpful for folks to know that when something's not working for them, that they're not the only person that it's not working for. And so those are things that in this moment is really important for folks to know that if there are Supreme Court decisions that don't align with who we are, that people will be in the streets, that this isn't something that people will ignore. And so I think all of those things are really important. And I want to give anyone else a chance to come back in if that's if there's anything else they want to add there.
Hey, I forgot to say that one of the reasons the Respect for Marriage Act passed is because we had those strong relationships. Because the reason it passed is because at the same time that it created those incredibly strong protections for marriage equality. It codified existing religious liberty protections, didn't break any new ground, so it's just codified into laws, protections that already existed. But it's only because we got support from moderately conservative religious leaders and groups that law passed. So that is a very concrete and important example of, we could do more stuff like that if we strengthen those relationships more.
If the worst comes to pass for us, will NCLR be able to help some of us leave and become refugees in other LGBTQ plus friendly countries? I'm not kidding. It seems hard to get visas. NCLR is always working to do what we can to take care of folks. I will say that one of the things that I am leaning into right now is that we're doing a really good job in the ways that we're pushing back. And the reason we're able to do that is because we are leaning into the work that we do best. The work that NCLR leads in is the work that we're doing. If there are folks that are doing this work at a larger scale and much better than we are leaving it to our partner organizations to do that. So that said, it would depend on what this looks like. If it was something that, I think we are far away from that, and that's not what NCLR is particularly skilled at doing. But we will do everything that we can that is within our skill set to keep our community safe, and we will always be thinking a step ahead. And if it comes down to it, if it's not something that we can do, we will always find ways to find our partners and find ways for folks to support themselves and think about all the options that work for you and your family. But I do want to lean into the fact that we are a legal organization made up largely of lawyers who do their jobs very, very well. And so I really want to make sure that we're doing that work. Let's see. Thank you so much.
Hey, Monty, can I jump in here?
Please.
To the question, what we can do in this moment is show up for your local communities. Because I really think it does come into what Shannon and Monty are saying. I think it does matter when people see queer and trans people in our communities as human beings who are giving back. I think what we're facing right now is a sense of the zero sum, us versus them mentality. And I've seen this in my work. I remember a few years ago during the Biden administration, we had a campaign called Fight LGBTQ Poverty. And that was like our hashtag or something similar to that. And I remember a random person on Twitter, or now X, whatever it's called. And the person's like, does that mean you don't care about poverty about other groups? And I was like, of course not, because if you actually looked at the priorities within the document that we had sent over to the Biden administration, a lot of those recommendations were not specific to LGBTQ people, because we understand that most of the solutions are not specific to our community, especially when it comes to economic justice issues. But it really helped me to understand that if someone has a different understanding of the world, if you're communicating something, that they're interpreting that through their own lens. And so I can say, of course, it makes sense to me, but then it made me really think about, I was like, oh, I need to be mindful of how I communicate myself. And so one is like, how do we communicate ourselves? And two, people are impacted when they have positive experience with people of different backgrounds. That really does change people's minds. It's easy to dehumanize people when they're just like a theoretical person. But if you're showing up in your community at the food pantry or other organizations, and people are getting to know you, like, oh, you have to go to Penn on, and they're like, oh, you're fun, I like you, like you seem cool, right? And then they're going to associate that positive experience when they hear something related to LGBTQ people. That can make a huge difference. And two, I think that would make us feel more safe. I think a part of what happens is that we isolate ourselves, in part because we have been traumatized as queer and trans people. So we find safe spaces, but sometimes when we stay in our safe spaces, we become stagnant because we're not interacting with people. And so it can reinforce this notion that the world is really scary. And so then when these moments happen, it's kind of triggering these feelings in us. And so I find that like when I'm interacting with people who are different backgrounds, I was in Palm Springs the other other week, and I ended up getting in a conversation with a 60-year-old cis straight white man who's a Trump supporter, and we had a good time. I won't say his name, but I said the next time I come back, I'm going to catch up with you because he was going on a 3-month trip. And it was just like, it's a really warm conversation. If I had just jumped and was like, oh, you're a Trump supporter, I can't talk to you, we couldn't have like a 1 hour, it was a random 1 hour conversation. I was trying to just go to a vintage clothing store and we had a 1 hour conversation. And that honestly made me feel, and I can tell energetically that it was a positive experience for the both of us. We shook hands, introduced ourselves. And so I think that's something that's also we can really be doing is like show up in community as who we genuinely are. Because that I think that makes not only us feel better, but it helps change people's hearts and mind to what Imani and Shannon are saying. That's it.
Amani, you're mute.
Goodness. Thank you so much, Tyrone. I appreciate it. Other questions. How far will the destructive, the destruction actions of DEI, well, is asking about, the impact of, the impact of DEI and how we've seen so many, folks from the administration coming after DEI and, painting that as sort of the, something we should be afraid of. I have some thoughts there, but I do want to give some, open up to anyone else if they want to share anything. Well, one of the things that I guess I want to mention about this, we talked a lot about, when our Don't Say Gay or Trans case was up, we were talking specifically about what this meant, not just what this means in this moment, but what it means for the future. And I think in this moment, one of the things that I am most concerned about is that when we talk about DEI, I think folks are thinking about in the here and now, what that means about our businesses right now, our boardrooms right now, but not thinking about so much about what this looks like in the future. And I'm particularly concerned about that because DEI initiatives are really things that are that came out as a way to bolster the Civil Rights Act and a way to find more protections and get folks in positions of power that honestly weren't there before. These were created to help to even an uneven playing field. And now these are being painted as the things that are keeping things uneven. And this is part of a larger tactic that we're seeing that is just simply untrue. And it's taking the thing that is the actual problem and ignoring the thing that's the actual problem and then finding the solution and saying that's the problem. If this were a social fiction, like a science fiction book, this would be where we are eating the thing that's actually killing us. And I think that's something that's really, really important in this moment. The other part is how careful we are when we're talking about DEI, if we are really clear about what we're talking about. Because, there's a lot of ways that we see that the people that most benefit from DEI aren't always the folks that people are saying. When you're saying DEI, you're talking specifically about Black and brown folks. You're talking specifically about LGBTQ folks. And that's not actually when these groups are the people that benefit the most from DEI. And so we just see some scapegoating that happens there. And so that is something that I'm absolutely concerned about and something we need to pay attention to. I think we're going to need to tell people, if we are talking about something that we have to make sure that they are explaining exactly what it is that they're talking about and not just letting using DEI just generally mean people of color, generally mean LGBTQ people. And that's something we're going to have to pay attention to. But, I think for folks that benefit from racist principles, the people that benefit when LGBTQ people are marginalized, they're going to continue doing that. Just reading the questions right now. You all are so kind. Thank you so much for all the love you're sending. NCLR, the panelists can see all of this. Thank you. It looks like I think we have answered most of the questions. I just want to give shout out to Maya. Thank you so much. Maya is our previous federal policy director here at NCLR, and also my sister, saying thank you so much for all the work that you're doing across the board. Are there ways that we can support your work and stay connected? Shannon, you have some thoughts?
Yes, I want to say hey to Maya too, and thank you so much for your brilliant leadership when you were at NCLR and for all the work you're doing now. Yes, Maya, you need to adopt some more cats. For everyone that doesn't know, I rescue cats on the side, and I have a whole house full of cats. If anyone out here is listening, these cats need some good homes. So talk to me.
It's true, and it is more cats than you think that there are. So there are plenty of cats to go around. So thank you so much, everyone. Please adopt cats. They're lovely. But we really appreciate spending time with you. So it's always our honor to be able to explain the work that we're doing to you. It's always our honor to do that. And we couldn't do this without your support. So thank you so much for believing in NCLR and for partnering with us and staying with us during talks like this, asking questions and really being involved. And I also want to leave you with this. There's no way to sugarcoat the supreme danger that we're all in, but it doesn't get enough attention, the ways that we're fighting back. And I want to be clear, because there are people that are experiencing unfathomable harm right now, and I don't want to undermine that. But I also want you to know that the work that we're doing, the work that you are investing in, is absolutely slowing this harm down, and it is absolutely saving lives. You are saving lives. We are making sure that your investment is going to really good work. And you are absolutely making a difference. So thank you. We're seeing that courage is in short supply these days, but I have been reminded that courage is also contagious. And so let's do as much good as humanly possible, and people will follow us. So to find out more information, I'm going to see if I can drop some resources in the chat, but there are some mutual aid resources near you. I'm going to drop something like that in the chat. There are places you can find a protest that might work for you. I'm going to drop something here in the chat. Remember, making your voice heard in a variety of ways. This might be something that works for you. And also, just want to remind you to come to our website. I'm going to drop a link to our YouTube link, and it'll have this in a few days when we're able to upload this, and also our previous briefings if you ever want to rewatch those. And then you can stay connected to NCLR for our updates. We have our monthly newsletter. It's called The Brief. So sign up for that, and you can have just a monthly update of the things that we're working on, or come to our website. We have a ton of blogs, and when we are quoted, we post articles. We do this on social media as well. You can find all of this work. Oh, and it sounds like all of those things are up. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you so much to the brilliant staff at NCLR for keeping everyone in this country safer. And thanks again, everyone, for watching. Take very good care of yourself and of all of us. Thanks, y'all.